"You're not my blood," my father declared across the mahogany conference table, his voice carrying the cold finality of a man who had waited decades to speak these words aloud. "The estate goes to Victoria and James. My real children. You were just something your mother brought into this marriage, a burden I tolerated out of obligation." My half-siblings smiled triumphantly from their leather chairs, already calculating their shares of the Harrison fortune. But why did the estate lawyer, Mr. Nathaniel Cross, shift uncomfortably in his seat, and why did his next words transform Victoria's smile into something closer to horror? "Mr. Harrison, I need to interrupt. There's a codicil you weren't aware of." My father's confident expression flickered. "What codicil? I've seen every document, not this one. Your late wife, Eleanor, held separate assets in a trust established before your marriage. Assets you were never informed of because the trust was structured specifically to exclude spousal awareness." Mr. Cross opened a thick folder. "Those assets total approximately $23 million. They transfer entirely to her biological daughter, Meredith, upon Eleanor's death." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Victoria's triumphant smile crumbled. James leaned forward. "That's impossible. Mom didn't have money. Your stepmother had significant family wealth that she kept separate from your father's estate. Legally, completely separate." Mr. Cross turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Ms. Harrison, you're the sole beneficiary of the Eleanor Mitchell Family Trust. I have documents here that require your signature." I'd been the unwanted child for 34 years. My mother, Eleanor, had married Richard Harrison when I was 4 years old. She'd been a young widow. My biological father had died in a construction accident when I was 2, and Richard had seemed like salvation. Wealthy, established, offering stability that her waitressing job couldn't provide. What she got instead was a man who resented every reminder that his new wife had existed before him. I was that reminder. Every time he looked at me, he saw evidence that Eleanor had loved someone else first. He tolerated my presence in his home the way one tolerates an ugly piece of furniture inherited from a relative, endured but never accepted. Victoria and James arrived when I was 6 and 8 respectively. They were Harrison children, legitimate, wanted, worthy of the name. I was merely Meredith, the stepchild who should be grateful for the roof over her head. "You're lucky I don't send you to foster care," Richard had told me once, when I was 12 and had accidentally broken a vase. "Remember that the next time you touch things that don't belong to you." I'd learned to be invisible. To take up as little space as possible, need as little as possible, expect nothing from a man who had made clear I deserved nothing. My mother had tried to shield me from the worst of it, but she was trapped too, financially dependent, emotionally beaten down, unable to protect me without risking the security that her marriage provided. She died when I was 28, after a long battle with cancer. She'd never told me about the trust. The estate reading had been scheduled for 2 weeks after her funeral. I'd almost not attended. Richard had made clear I wasn't welcome at family gatherings, and I assumed Eleanor's estate, whatever little she had, would go to her husband and his children. But Mr. Cross had insisted. "Your presence is required, Miss Harrison. There are matters that directly concern you." I'd arrived expecting humiliation. One final reminder that I didn't belong, that whatever my mother had accumulated during her 30 years of marriage would go to the family that had never accepted me. Instead, I'd walked into a revelation that was about to restructure everything. $23 million, Richard repeated, his voice strangled. Eleanor didn't have $23 million. Eleanor Mitchell had $23 million, Mr. Cross corrected. The trust was established by her parents before your marriage, structured as a generation-skipping trust to protect assets from spousal claims. Your wife was the income beneficiary during her lifetime, but the principal was always designated for her biological descendants. Her parents were middle class. Her parents owned Mitchell Manufacturing. They sold it in 1987 for $47 million. Eleanor's share was placed in trust, where it has grown substantially over the past 37 years. My mind was reeling. Mitchell Manufacturing. I'd never heard of it. My grandparents had always seemed comfortable but not wealthy, a modest house, sensible cars, nothing that suggested millions in hidden assets. They kept it quiet deliberately, Mr. Cross explained, seeing my confusion. Your grandparents were concerned about fortune hunters. They established the trust to protect Eleanor's inheritance from anyone who might marry her for money rather than love. He paused meaningfully. The trust was specifically designed to exclude spouses from any claim to the principal. Your mother could use the income, approximately $400,000 annually, but the principal remained protected for her children. She never spent $400,000 a year, I said. She lived like we were barely getting by. She did spend it, Miss Harrison. Just not on herself. The second revelation hit even harder than the first. Mr. Cross produced another folder, this one filled with financial records, receipts, and correspondence spanning decades. Your mother established a shadow support system for you. College tuition that you believed came from scholarships? Your mother paid it through the trust. The anonymous donor who funded your graduate school? Your mother. The down payment assistance you received for your first apartment, attributed to a bank program? Your mother arranged it. I stared at the documents, seeing my entire financial history rewritten. She couldn't give you money directly without raising questions from your stepfather. So she created fictional programs, fake scholarships, assistance that seemed to come from institutions rather than her. Mr. Cross's voice softened. She protected you the only way she could, invisibly. The tears came before I could stop them. All those years thinking I'd earned everything on my own, that I'd escaped my stepfather's house through pure merit and determination. My mother had been there all along, clearing paths I didn't know existed. Why didn't she tell me? Because Richard monitored everything. If you'd known about the trust, if you'd let anything slip, he would have found ways to interfere. Her lawyers advised complete secrecy until her death. But she could have left him. With that much money? She considered it. Many times. But she was afraid of what he might do, how he might retaliate. And, Mr. Cross hesitated. She wanted to protect Victoria and James too. They were her stepchildren, but she loved them. Leaving would have meant abandoning them to Richard's influence entirely. My mother had stayed in a miserable marriage, endured decades of unhappiness, to protect children who weren't even hers, children who had grown up despising me because their father had taught them to. Victoria found her voice first. This is fraud. Mom couldn't have hidden money from Dad for 30 years, it's not fraud. It's competent estate planning. Mr. Cross's tone carried the patience of someone who had explained legal concepts to entitled heirs many times before. Premarital assets held in properly structured trusts are not marital property. Your father had no legal claim to Eleanor's inheritance, and she had no legal obligation to disclose it. But the lifestyle, she lived in our house, used our money. She contributed her trust income to household expenses for years. Approximately $8 million over the course of the marriage, according to our records. She hardly lived as a dependent. James spoke up. What about us? We're her children too. You're her stepchildren. The trust specifically designates biological descendants. Eleanor did, however, leave personal bequests to both of you in her will, $100,000 each, from her discretionary assets. $100,000? Victoria's voice rose. Meredith gets $23 million and we get $100,000? You're also receiving substantial inheritances from your father's estate, which remains entirely separate from your stepmother's trust. Meredith receives nothing from your father's assets. Because she's not his child, Richard spat. She never was. She never will be. That's correct, Mr. Harrison. Which is why she inherits from her mother instead. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Victoria demanded audits, investigations, proof that the trust wasn't fraudulent. James threatened lawsuits. Richard sat in stunned silence, apparently unable to process that the wife he dismissed as dependent and powerless had possessed more wealth than he accumulated in his entire career. Mr. Cross remained calm throughout. You're welcome to pursue legal challenges. I'll warn you that this trust has been reviewed by multiple law firms over the decades and is considered bulletproof. The Mitchell family attorneys were exceptionally thorough. We'll find something, Victoria insisted. There has to be a way, there isn't. The trust was designed specifically to withstand exactly this kind of challenge. Your stepmother's family anticipated that her marriage might produce complications. The word hung in the air. Complications. That's what I'd been my entire life in this family, a complication to be managed, minimized, eventually eliminated. Except my mother had been planning all along. Protecting me in ways I'd never known, positioning me for a future she wouldn't live to see. I requested a private meeting with Mr. Cross after the others left. I need to understand something. My mother lived 30 years in a marriage that made her miserable. She had enough money to leave at any time. Why did she stay? That's a question only she could fully answer. But, he pulled out a letter, sealed and addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. She left this for you. Perhaps it explains what I cannot. I took the envelope with trembling hands. There's one more thing you should know, Miss Harrison. Your mother didn't just accumulate this trust. She grew it substantially through careful investment. The original principal was approximately $11 million. Her financial acumen more than doubled it. She made investment decisions? Monthly. For 34 years. She maintained a separate phone, a separate email account, a relationship with financial advisors that your stepfather never knew existed. Your mother was. He smiled slightly. Not the woman your father believed she was. Not even close. I read the letter alone, in my apartment, hours after the meeting ended. My dearest Meredith. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you finally know the truth. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I'm sorry for so many things. Your father, your real father, David, was the love of my life. When he died, I thought my world had ended. Then Richard came along, offering security, stability, a future for us. I convinced myself it would be enough. It wasn't. I realized too late what kind of man Richard was. By then, I had Victoria and James, children I loved, even though they weren't mine by blood. And I had you, who Richard seemed determined to destroy through 1,000 small cruelties. I couldn't leave. If I'd taken you and gone, Richard would have fought for custody, not because he wanted the children, but because he couldn't stand to lose. He would have used his money, his connections, his lawyers to make our lives hell. And Victoria and James would have been left alone with him, shaped entirely by his bitterness. So I stayed. And I protected you the only way I could, invisibly. Every scholarship, every grant, every opportunity that seemed to appear by magic? That was me. I watched you grow into someone extraordinary, and I made sure you had the resources to become whoever you wanted to be. The money isn't just inheritance, sweetheart. It's 34 years of love I couldn't express openly. Every dollar represents a moment I wanted to tell you how proud I was, how much you meant to me, how wrong your stepfather was about everything. Use it to build a life that makes you happy. Don't let Richard's voice live in your head anymore. You were always worthy. You were always enough. You were always my greatest joy. I love you forever. Mom. P.S. Your grandmother's wedding ring is in a safety deposit box at First National. She wanted you to have it for your own wedding someday. I protected it from Richard too. The lawsuit came 3 months later. Victoria and James, with Richard's financial backing, challenged the trust on grounds of undue influence and fraud. They claimed Eleanor had been manipulated, that the trust documents had been falsified, that I had somehow orchestrated a 37-year conspiracy to steal their rightful inheritance. The case was dismissed within 6 months. The trust documentation was impeccable. The financial records were transparent. Multiple witnesses, attorneys, financial advisors, bank officers, testified to Eleanor's independent management of her assets over decades. The judge's ruling was scathing. The plaintiffs have presented no evidence of fraud, manipulation, or improper influence. What they have presented is resentment that their stepmother possessed wealth they didn't know about and chose to leave it to her biological daughter. That is not a legal grievance. That is a family disappointment. The Harrisons were ordered to pay my legal fees, approximately $340,000. Richard reached out 6 months after the lawsuit ended. I almost didn't take his call. But something, curiosity, perhaps, or closure, made me answer. Meredith. I need to talk to you. About what? About your mother. About everything. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop neither of us had ever visited. He looked older than I remembered, diminished in ways that went beyond physical aging. I didn't know about the money, he said immediately. For 30 years, I didn't know. I believe you. I thought she stayed because she had nowhere else to go. Because she needed me. He laughed bitterly. She could have left any time. She chose to stay. She chose to protect all of us. Including Victoria and James. But not from me. She stayed to protect them from me. I didn't confirm or deny. The silence said enough. I wasn't a good father to you, Meredith. I told myself it was because you weren't mine, but that was an excuse. I was cruel because I could be. Because you were there and you couldn't fight back. I know. Your mother saw it. Every moment of it. And she stayed anyway, building this secret life, protecting you in ways I couldn't see. He shook his head. I thought I was the powerful one in that marriage. I thought I controlled everything. But she was running circles around me the entire time. What do you want from me, Richard? Forgiveness? I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to know. I understand now. What she did. Why she did it. You were her priority. You were always her priority. The conversation didn't heal anything, but it clarified things. Richard wasn't apologizing because he'd realized he was wrong. He was apologizing because he'd realized he'd been outmaneuvered. His ego was wounded, not his conscience. I left the coffee shop knowing I would never see him again. Not out of anger, out of recognition that we had nothing to say to each other. We never had. Victoria and James never reached out. They'd been taught from childhood that I was lesser, and $23 million hadn't changed their fundamental belief. If anything, my inheritance confirmed their resentment, proof that even in death, my mother had chosen me over them. They didn't understand that she'd chosen all of us. She'd stayed in a miserable marriage to protect them as much as me. The difference was that I knew it now, and they never would. The money changed my external circumstances but not my identity. I established the Eleanor Mitchell Foundation, funding scholarships for first-generation college students, the kind of invisible support my mother had provided me. I invested in affordable housing, remembering the apartment assistance that had seemed like luck. I created opportunities for people who, like me, had been told they didn't deserve them. The Foundation's annual report includes a letter from my mother, edited for privacy, but capturing her philosophy: every child deserves someone who believes in them, even when that belief must remain invisible. Sometimes the most powerful support is the kind that lets the recipient believe they've earned everything themselves. My grandmother's ring sits in a velvet box in my bedroom. I haven't worn it yet. Haven't found the right moment, the right person, the right life that would do it justice. But I take it out sometimes, holding the diamonds and gold that my grandmother protected, that my mother protected, that now I protect for whatever future I build. 3 generations of Mitchell women, keeping secrets, accumulating power, surviving marriages to men who underestimated them. The ring is more than jewelry. It's a legacy of resilience. Of playing long games. Of understanding that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. Richard died 2 years after our coffee shop conversation. I wasn't mentioned in his obituary, not that I expected to be. But I attended the funeral anyway, sitting in the back, watching Victoria and James accept condolences as the legitimate Harrison heirs. They didn't acknowledge me. I didn't need them to. What I needed was closure. And watching them celebrate a man who had never deserved their admiration, I finally had it. My mother had won. Not through confrontation, not through dramatic revelations, but through patience and planning and love expressed in ways Richard could never understand. She'd given me money, yes. But more importantly, she'd given me proof that someone had been fighting for me all along, even when I felt completely alone. He announced that his real children would inherit everything, confident that 30 years of cruelty had finally paid off. He didn't know that his wife, the woman he dismissed as dependent and powerless, had been protecting me since before his children were born. $23 million in hidden assets. Decades of invisible support. A mother's love expressed through trusts and scholarships and opportunities that seemed like luck but were actually her. He thought he'd won. He'd never even been in the game. The estate lawyer's documents told a different story, one where the unwanted stepchild was the most protected person in the room. One where the quiet woman he'd underestimated had been outmaneuvering him all along. One where love, given invisibly, outlasted everything he tried to destroy.